All right, welcome to the channel. This is KC, and today, and for the foreseeable future, the concept that I've come up with for this channel is tier lists. Basically, based on the NBA and different concepts within the NBA. Today, I'm going to keep it very, very basic. This is a tier list ranking NBA teams by their championship potential. I decided this would be a good starter video. It's not too complex, but it kind of gives me the ability to kind of get it going, kind of see how this goes. Um, but yeah, I've always been interested in the tier list concept. I think it is a good way to get your thoughts kind of gathered and be able to properly articulate what you think about a certain concept. Just kind of a good way to channel your ideas when it comes to just basketball or whatever topic you want to talk about in general. So, with that being said, the way I'm going to rank these is basically S tier, high chance of winning it all, A tier, second tier contender, maybe not as high as the S tier, or not as high as the S tier in my opinion, but still a pretty good competitor and could win it all. B, dark horse, a team that I don't predict to win it, but under certain circumstances, they could absolutely make a run. They have the talent to do it. C, I'm going to say rank it as like a tough out. May win a series, but likely if they move on to the next round, they probably won't beat any of the better teams. But they are going to be a tough team to beat, I think, under a certain circumstance. D, unlikely to win much at all. Just a team that might make the playoffs, but more than likely is not talented enough to make any waves. And finally, F, unlikely to make the playoffs or just a bad team, basically. So with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get started. The first team I'm going to discuss here is the Milwaukee Bucks. So, and I'm kind of just going to jump around here, just whatever team seems to like catch my eye to talk about a little bit. I'm going to touch on them. But I'm going to start with the Bucks. A team with Giannis is always going to be competitive. He's got the prime LeBron effect in that way. You know, when a team or when a guy is as good as him, just the attention he draws makes everyone around him better. It helps that he is surrounded by legitimate pieces. Even with Middleton missing a lot of games this year, they've still got the ever-consistent Drew Holiday. They've got Lopez, who's really had one of his better seasons since being in Milwaukee, and since he's kind of reformed his game to be a more stretch big. Portis has always been a really solid bench piece for them, spot starter, and other really solid pieces surrounding that core. They're still well set to compete at the highest level now and for the future. They are one of my favorite teams for the title, and so for that reason, I'm going to put the Bucks in the S tier. All right, so next up, I think I'm going to touch on the Nets. So the Nets are a different team now than they were a month ago, obviously. They've shifted from a hopeful contender to rebuild mode, basically. Guys like Mikal Bridges, who has been insane recently, Claxton, who's had a real breakout year, Cam Johnson, who I really like his fit with this team. I think he's got good potential to show what he really can do and really develop more with this rebuilding roster. And also someone who I think should still be getting more minutes in Cam Thomas. Yes, he plays zero defense, but who cares? He's fun to watch and he's a good offensive player. With that core, they've got a pretty decent head start when it comes to the rebuild. But obviously they're still in the playoff race, but they're not likely to make any real noise. They're just not in the position to do that. But the fact that they are still in the playoffs technically makes it to where they're not F tier, but they're not going to win much even if they do stay in. So for that reason, the Nets are going to go D tier. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the Knicks. So the Knicks, I see why Knicks fans are really happy with the way this season has gone. They've really outperformed expectations and have clearly looked like a playoff team. That being said, I'm not seeing much more than a potential second round appearance if they get the right first round matchup. But even then, that might be unlikely. Um, for example, they're currently the 5 seed, and the Cavs are the 4 seed. Does anyone predict the Knicks will beat the Cavs in a series? I certainly would not. Um, that being said, Brunson has lived up to his contract. Randall has redeemed himself in the eyes of many, myself included. I know a lot of Knicks fans weren't really happy with the way that Randall's been. Some have wanted to trade him. To me, though, I think he's done a really good job this year in showing that he's a pretty good piece for that team. Um, they have some other interesting pieces. Grimes, quickly, even Jericho Sims, I like. Those are guys that I think could really develop and build with that team. I think they need to free Obi Toppin. I think there's no way, the way the current roster's constructed, that Obi Toppin's going to get the minutes he needs to develop, and I think he's still got something to his game. But that being said, I don't think they're in the worst spot as a team, but I don't think they're in the best spot either. I'm going to put them in the C tier. I do not think the Knicks are a contender as of now. So the next team I'm going to talk about a little bit is the Raptors. So the Raptors. The Raptors are a little bit disappointing, I will say. They aren't supremely talented, no, but I do think they have some pieces that I was hoping would come together in a better fashion. That being said, I do honestly think that they could, under some circumstance, be competitive if they manage to be in the playoffs. Van Vliet, Trent, OG, Scotty Barnes, Siakam, Pirtle. That's actually a really tough core group, or at least it should be. If they start playing up to where their talent level is, I could definitely see them making it in the playoffs and giving a higher seeded team a bit of trouble. A series win is probably not likely, but it's not impossible either if they get the right matchup. So for that reason, I'm going to put the Raptors in the C tier here. Next up, I think we're going to talk about the Utah Jazz. So, the Jazz, everyone's favorite early season underdog story, the Jazz. They've fallen off a bit. Still an impressive run by a team many considered to likely be at the bottom of the standings. Lowry's emergence, trading Rudy Gobert, getting a haul of picks for Rudy Gobert, and then turning around and then drafting basically a younger Rudy Gobert and Walker Kessler. That's quite the move. Jordan Clarkson, they've really made this team pretty fun to watch. But that being said, they're not contenders. They're just further along in the rebuild than many expected. But they have really good pieces for the future. And like I said, further along in the rebuild than anyone would have predicted so far. But that being said, like I said, they're not great at this point in time. So the Jazz are going to go in the D tier for me. Next up, I'm going to go with the Rockets. So the Rockets, in my opinion, they're not good, obviously. But they do have one of the more fun young teams to watch in the league. Jalen Green, he's an incredibly exciting young scorer. Sengun has bits and pieces of his game that really starts to look like Jokic out there. I mean, obviously he's not that good, and more than likely will never be that good. It's really a hard standard to live up to, that 2 MVPs, potentially a third here. But he looks like a good player in that same mold. And then I still believe in Kevin Porter Jr. to some degree, if he could stay healthy and out of personal issues. Any consistent time with that team, I think he would actually be a productive piece for them. I was never incredibly high on Jabari Smith Jr. coming into the draft, and I haven't been this season either. But I think he can be a decent piece of the future as well. He's shown some flashes that he does have some game to him. In their most recent game that I watched, he had a monster performance against the Pacers. Yes, it's just the Pacers, but he's got some room to go, I think. He's got some room to go, and obviously their team ceiling can be massive if they win that Wembanyama sweepstakes over the summer. But as of now, they are obviously not contenders. They are going to go into the F tier. Next up, I'm going to talk about the Pelicans. So, the Pelicans, they were really rolling for a moment there, but I think that's proven to be unsustainable in the grand scheme of things. What I do think, however, is that I think they make it in the playoffs, and I think if they do, they could give a team some difficulty. I think McCollum and Ingram alone, that's a solid 1-2 punch with guys like Murphy, Valanciunas, Alvarado, solid role pieces there, and that's just under the assumption that Zion might not be available. If Zion is available, they're probably one of those lower seeded teams no higher seed is going to want to play. Um, but in general, I think the Pelicans are not quite contenders, but they're not terrible either. I'm going to put them in the C tier. So next up, I'm just going to touch on the Lakers here. The Lakers do not inspire much confidence in me. Yes, I know. LeBron still defies reality with his performance at his age, and AD is one of the best players in the NBA when he's healthy. But they just can't seem to make it work. I actually like some of their trade deadline acquisitions, like D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, Vanderbilt, but it just seems like they're a bunch of pieces thrown together without any comprehensive plan. Not to mention their complete lack of draft picks for the future. They would be in a complete nightmare position here in 3 or 4 years if it wasn't for the fact that I think their history and location will draw a superstar or two to keep themselves relevant. I think if they were any other franchise, they would be completely screwed due to the fact that their roster and asset management has just been so poor over the past years. But I mean, we should see. We shall see if they can pull it off. As of now, though, they're just not very good. With the talent they have, I'm not going to put them in the F tier, but they are a D tier team to me. The Lakers they're just not very good. The Bulls, another team that's in one of the worst positions in basketball. Average to below average when it comes to performance. They just don't accumulate wins. They're built for now and not the future, even the way they perform in the standings. Vucevic, DeRozan, Levine, they're either in their primes or actually exiting out of them, and they just have a general lack of exciting young pieces. I think it's well past time for Chicago to just blow it up. Get an injection of picks and young talent for the guys in their primes that they have, because this current roster is just not working at competitive level. They're just not performing with the top teams when basically their roster is built as though they should be. So unfortunately, the Bulls, they're just not good. They're going to go in the F tier. So next up, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Timberwolves. So the Timberwolves have always been one of those teams that, to me, has just consistently been pretty good when it comes to talent, but just can't get themselves into true contention. They've had some really good players over the years, but they just have not been competitive. Towns being out a good portion of the year certainly has not helped their case, but they really just can't seem to get over the hump, Without Towns, Edwards and Gobert and others, they've got them into the 7 seed, but if they want to have any semblance of contending or competing with anybody, they're going to have Towns back. And in reality, that's really not likely to make that much of a difference, even if they do have Towns. It's just going to make them a bit better, but they're still not a top team. But they do have some talent, so I'm going to put the Timberwolves in the C tier. So next up, I'm going to discuss the Portland Trail Blazers, or probably more properly known as the Portland Damian Lillards, because they continue to, unfortunately, be a team with one true star and not enough pieces around him to make a difference. Anthony Simons shows good promise. Grant and Nurkic are good players, but they just aren't the type of difference makers that are going to move the needle in a deep Western Conference. I do think they're in a better spot for the future than they have been in recent years. The aforementioned Simons, Shaden Sharp, even Cam Reddish. I mean, they're a bit of youth that I think gives them a chance to be something over time. But as of now, they're also just not very good, and so I'm going to put them in the F tier. So now I'm going to go to the opposite end of the spectrum and talk about a team that I think is pretty good, the Denver Nuggets. They're currently the best team in the West, record-wise and probably performance-wise as well. They're, to me, one of the top three contenders for the title, alongside a couple of teams that I'm going to talk about later. Um, I think Jokic continues to show that he may be the best player in basketball. If it wasn't for his defensive shortcomings, then I think he absolutely would be considered just by far the best player in basketball. His offensive game is just so incredible. Um, Aaron Gordon has stepped up his play to a really good level this year. Um, Jamal Murray has shown after injury he's still a high level guard, and MPJ is starting to show signs again that he's got some productivity to his game. No, they're not my favorite for the title, but they're one of them. I think they have some pretty good depth and good top end talent. I think they're legit. The Nuggets are going to go into the S tier. So next up, kind of switching the pendulum back to the other end, the Thunder. So the resident tanking team of the NBA, the Thunder are not contending right now, and they don't particularly intend to. But I do believe they're starting to get to the point to where they have enough young talent to make a go at it next year, I think. I think they can try next year. Shea is elite, and he has really shown that this season. Giddey looks good. Jalen Williams looked like he could potentially be the steal of the draft alongside Walker Kessler. And, other young developing pieces have shown good flashes. With Chet making his debut next season, hopefully, alongside a new highly drafted rookie, things are looking like they may soon be taking a turn for the better for the Thunder. So, as of now, though, they're obviously not good. But they are starting to show signs. But they are in the F tier for me. The Grizzlies are up next, and the Grizzlies are a hard case because they have everything they need to be competitive, but likely are not going to be because of the lack of Ja. They've got the star, they've got Bane as a great secondary scorer, overall player in general. They've got probably the defensive player of the year front runner in Jaren Jackson, along with a solid supporting core around that. However, with the personal issues of Ja currently in the forefront, his status is going to make or break the Grizzlies. With him in that lineup, I would put them A tier. Without him, they're C tier. So with the uncertainty around that, I'm going to place them in the middle, and they're going to be a B tier team for me. The first team in the B tier. Not the only one, but currently the first. So next up, I'm going to do the Mavericks. I know the Luka Kyrie pairing has not worked to the degree that everyone kind of expected when Kyrie got traded there, but to me, I think that's probably just growing pains. I always said all Luka needed was a secondary star, and they'd be good to make a run, and that's what Kyrie is providing to them. And I think they've got other good pieces around them as well. I think they've got Christian Wood, Tim Hardaway Jr., Powell, Bullock. They have the pieces to compete. I think all they need to do is let those pieces gel and kind of get used to each other. But I do think the Mavs are a outside contender for the title. And so for that, they are going to go into the A tier. So next up, the Spurs. So obviously not competitive right now, and currently with what I would say is probably the least talented roster in the NBA. Keldon, Vassell, Branham, Sohan, they all interest me as younger players with potential to grow, but I'm not seeing a whole lot of all-star potential between that group. Things can change for sure, but I do see them as a favorite for Wembanyama or Scoot, and I think that could be their star that they need, but as of now, the Spurs have a ways to go. They're not particularly close to competing, so they are going to be F tier for me. Now, for one of my, and probably my direct favorite for the title, if things go the way that I think they will, the Suns. So I do believe that KD is exactly what this team needed. I think they were already near the top to begin with, but adding one of the best players of the past decade to your already elite roster is a recipe for major success. I think losing Mike Hale and also losing Cam Johnson, that's not ideal. But the trade is 100% an improvement in the present day. I think the KD injury is not great, but I think they can stay afloat long enough for him to get back and get back to 100%. Um, and if that happens, if he does get back to 100%, the Suns are my favorite for the title. I think that group is just so incredibly talented. I think CP3 finally gets his with potentially the best team that he's ever had in his career, just talent wise. They're incredibly talented, got all the pieces they need at key positions. I am going to say the Suns are S tier. So next up, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Clippers. So honestly, it's easy to sleep on the Clippers. No matter what their roster has looked like over the past decade or so, they just really haven't made any noise. They've had talent, but they just haven't made any noise, like I said. But just for some reason, I think the Westbrook addition is going to fit with them. I do. I know that sounds crazy, but I think having him out there as a primary distributor, kind of in a role with PG and hopefully a healthy Kawhi, is actually quite the dangerous concept. And I hope they're. I actually think they're going to be generally pretty fun to watch. And I think Westbrook could be that difference maker. Do I think they'll win a championship? No, I don't. But I do think stranger things have happened than a team with two elite two-way wings and a former MVP point guard going to make an unexpected run. I think there have been stranger things that have happened. So for that, I'm going to say the Clippers are going to be B tier. Next up, I'm going to talk about the Warriors. A team obviously never to be slept on. They're the defending champs and have stayed afloat while Steph has missed some time. Now that he's back, they're a threat once again. Mainstays like Steph, Clay, Wiggins, Draymond, obviously are the main core, but they've got young and improving pieces like Kuminga, DiVincenzo, Poole. They should be dangerous once again. With all that being said, they're going to be A tier for me. Next up, the Detroit Pistons. So the Pistons, they've had a bit of a rough go of it. Any hopes of taking a step were kind of derailed by the Cade injury, but they likely could have always used one where you're tanking regardless. I'm still unsure when it comes to some of their decisions, like why did they trade for Wiseman, for example? Like they have talented young bigs that need developmental playing time, and they're trading for another young big that needs playing time. I don't know how they're going to find all that PT for all of them. And it would really be unfortunate if someone like Duran loses out of minutes for that, because I think Duran is probably a more talented player than Wiseman at this point in time. But like I said, I like Duran. I really like Ivy, and I was really high on him in the draft process. I'm glad that he's succeeding with the Pistons. They've got other young pieces that could become something, but they're really one of the more exciting young teams in the NBA, but they're just not ready to compete right now. So the Pistons are going to go in the F tier. Now, this one might be a bit of an unpopular opinion because this team is performing so well right now, but the Kings. So the Kings, they vastly outperformed expectations. They're currently sitting as the 2 seed in the West, which is a huge leap that hasn't, they haven't made the playoffs in quite some time. Sabonis, he's the main addition that has been the driver of that, but, Fox has been a legit high-level point guard as well. Herter, Barnes, Murray, Monk, they're playing the roles well. That's been huge for them. Do I think they're actually true contenders? Probably not. I think they finally have the talent to make the playoffs and have really been pushing hard to make it there. I think when they do make it, teams are inevitably going to tighten up in the playoffs. And they'll get beat by a team that probably slacked off a bit in the regular season, with load management, resting guys just not putting it all out there because the playoffs were kind of a given for those teams. I think a team like that is a team that's going to beat the Kings. But I do think that this playoff experience they'll get, I think it'll be helpful for their development in the long run. And I think next year, even if their record isn't as good for the regular season next year as this year, I think they're going to be a better playoff team next year, just due to the fact that they're going to get that experience. But the Kings, they're going to go B tier for me. After that, the Cavs. I'm going to do Cavs. The Cavs, I was really close to putting in the S tier. But I decided there's a couple of teams that are just a bit more ready to compete at this current time than the Cavs. The team's time is coming, though. And they're still really young and really good. Garland, Allen, Mobley, they're only going to be getting better over time. And Mitchell has been absolutely top tier. He is not old either. He's playing like he's the best shooting guard in the NBA, which I believe he is. And the only thing that holds me up that I'm not extremely confident in is their bench pieces. I think some of their young guys need maybe one more year of development, but they are right there. I'm going to put the Cavs in the A tier. I think they do have a shot if things go right for them. So next up, the Celtics. So the Celtics, they're building really well off their appearance in last year's championship, and their stars continue more and more to show their improvement. Tatum has even more solidified why he's one of the best players in the NBA and will almost certainly be a perennial contender in the yearly MVP race. Brown has come into his own as a true secondary star, and the role pieces have continued to play their roles well. Smart continues to be a perfect glue piece at point guard with some of their new guys like Robert Williams. Well, not Robert Williams. He's not new. I mean Malcolm Brogdon and Derek White. Those newer additions. Those guys are going to be really solid. And obviously Robert Williams, Horford, Grant Williams, those other role pieces that have been more established. They have both the top end talent and the bench depth to be considered right at the top of the contenders. So to me, the Celtics are easily S tier. Really, my three favorites for the title are the Suns, the Celtics, the Nuggets, with the Bucks just slightly below those three. So yeah, that's my top four, obviously, sitting in the S tier. But next up, I'm going to talk about a team that I think is in a kind of a hard spot to judge, the Philadelphia 76ers. I don't know if they're contenders or not. Embiid and Harden, they're obviously super talented, high-level players, but they just have yet to prove that they're winners. I like Maxey too. Maxey is really good. And then the other guys they have, like Tobias Harris and some of those other pieces, is a pretty decent bench rotation. I just can't convince myself to be sold as them as a true top-tier contender. Their window probably isn't extraordinarily long, so if they're going to do something, they need to do something soon. Like Harden has a potential to leave and go back to Houston that I've heard rumored, or he could just go somewhere else in general. Don't get me wrong, they will be contenders. I just don't see a championship in the cards here for them. I'm going to put them in the A tier, though. They will be contenders. Next up, I'm going to talk about the Hornets. The Hornets are in not a great position. Because they're kind of built for... They've got some pieces built for now, but then they've got like LaMelo, who's obviously their main future piece. So that's a plus, obviously, but they're just not well positioned for the future. Oubre and Rozier, for example, they're in their primes, and they're not getting any younger, and they really should be on a team that's more competitive as opposed to this team that should be rebuilding. I mean, other than Mark Williams and, like, obviously LaMelo, as much as I wanted James Bouknight to be good, I thought he had some talent, but that's neither here nor there. They just don't have many great developmental pieces. They need to pick a direction as a franchise. I think they're trying to tank a bit, but they really need to move on from a couple of their older pieces and really just pick that direction. So the Hornets, they are going to be F tier for me. They're just not very good. Next up, the Wizards. So, this team really has more talent than people consider. Porzingis has been really good this season, actually. Beal has been the same old consistent all-star level scorer with just a couple injuries along the way. Even Kuzma has been really solid. That being said, they just can't seem to put it all together. Whether it's a lack of peripheral pieces or just being a team that lacks cohesion, they're just not there. It might be time to blow it up for real in Washington. They just don't really have the youth pieces they need for the future, but they're just not anywhere near contending either. So the Wizards, they're going to go to the D tier for me. Next up, another young team, the Magic. So the Magic, they've got a lot of pieces. Not a lot of them have truly hit their potential yet, but I foresee them to continue to stockpile picks in a year, but more than likely 2 years, starting to show signs of turning it around. Obviously, Ben Carroll looks every bit like an all-star power forward for the future, but Wagner, Markelle Fultz, Wendell Carter, they look like decent starting pieces as well. Guys like Cole Anthony, Bol Bol, Jalen Suggs, those are wild cards to me. I think those guys could have something to their game. For me, they're a fun team. They've got an outside chance to make the play-in. They're just not totally there yet. I don't think they'll make the play-in, even though they're close enough that they might make that 10 spot. But I'm just not. They're not there. They're an F tier team right now. But that's okay. I mean, like I said, they've got some talent. Um, Next up, I'm going to do the Heat. Somewhat of a middling team. They don't have much of a direction. I feel like the Heat missed their window, truly. It was a couple years ago, and I think that they've fallen away from that. Jimmy's not getting any younger. So really what my idea for what this team should do, they need to keep Bam, probably keep Hero, find ways to build on that. They easily could sell some of their aging pieces to a contender for picks or other young developing talent. And I feel like that'll really help position themselves for the future in a better way. But they've got so many guys that like Kevin Love, Oladipo, just older, more injury-prone guys. They're not going to make a difference for this team. They're unfortunately just kind of stuck in the middle of the pack, and so the Heat, they're going to be C tier for me. So two left. I'm going to talk on Atlanta first. A very disappointing season for Atlanta in my eyes. I was really high on the DeJounte Murray addition in the summer, but that's led to precisely zero improvement for their team. They have got no better. I think a lot of that might have to do with coaching, but they just have all the talent in the world to be good. They've got Trey, they've got DeJounte Murray, they've got Capella, Collins, Bay, Okongwu. Um, I hope they manage to turn around. Um, it's just, talent alone is why I've bounced back and forth between C and D tier. I think they have it in them. I just don't expect it, but I do think they have it in them. So I'm going to just very slightly put them in the C tier over the D tier. Just for me. I think they have the talent, but I don't know. It's hard to say. Finally, the Indiana Pacers. They've started off the year looking as though they could make a surprising appearance in the playoff picture. Um, at this point in the season, it's beginning to look pretty unlikely that they're going to make that playoff spot. But be that as it may, they have shown that they are well positioned for the future and could be contending sooner rather than later, and sooner than people expected in general. Halliburton is one of the best young point guards in the NBA. Miles Turner has finally made a bit of a leap that kind of everyone has been hoping for the past few years. He's really shown that he's now an above average starting big that could stretch the floor at a really high level for a center and continues to block shots at a near NBA best clip. And so that's really worked out well for them. And he's young enough that he fits with that core. A lot of the young reclamation projects and rookies are starting to show development because they have a good mix of like younger guys that they've grabbed from other teams and other guys they've drafted. Like Ben Mathurin, for example. Ben Mathurin, when he's getting the minutes, has shown that he is one of the better, I would say one of the better 3 or 4 rookies in this class. He's just a pure scorer and likely over time, if he develops the right way, is going to end up being the number one scorer for the Pacers team. And Halliburton will step into what is more naturally a distributor role for him as a point guard. And then, of course, defensive prowess of Andrew Nembhard has really looked good. He's been a good look for them from the second round. Flashes of starting level 3 and D production from Aaron Nesmith. Pacers are not there yet, but with a likely high pick in the coming draft, look for them to be higher in the next couple years. I think they have some pretty good young talent. But as of now, the Pacers, they're S tier. They're F tier as well. So there you have it. That is the tier list. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, anyone who stuck around for the whole thing. Again, this is just my kind of personal opinion after looking over these teams and their roster situations. If you have any disagreements, go ahead and let me know in the comments. As for the future, I've got some plans for, like I said at the beginning of the video, just different NBA tier lists. I've got anything from kind of basic top player ideas to kind of more outside the box concepts that I think would be kind of fun to talk about. But yeah, just in general, that's where I'm at with it. Here, March Madness is approaching here in the next few days where they announce the brackets. I've got some ideas for that as well. Like I said, this channel is going to be primarily NBA, but I think it will be kind of fun to talk about March Madness in a tier list format. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at with this channel. If anyone enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe. There's plenty of content coming soon. But, thanks for tuning in.